Quite some years ago, I first met Bert. He came down here to speak at the first Mass celebrated by our former deacon here, Dominic Lodge. And I was struck at that time by Bert's openness and his honesty and his enthusiasm for the gospel. And I thought, well, this can't be bad because this guy's just come out of seminary. And I had a fairly good idea of what goes on there. In the ensuing years, our paths have crossed a few times, and I've been very much encouraged by Bert in what I have been doing, and I thank him very much for that. Encouraged because that openness and that enthusiasm has remained with him, and I think has been very much enriched by his experience in those years that have gone past. And I'd like to introduce him to you. I'd like to welcome him to us, first of all. And just to commend our ears to what God has to say to us through Bert. So, Father, thank you for bringing Bert to us. And I ask you now just to let us put aside all the things that are bothering us or troubling us, and let us just listen to what it is that you have to say to us.
Yes, you're all so holy. I don't know what I'm doing here. I was standing outside thinking, are they going to stop in a minute? And I'd come in and I was here walking around. Anyway, it's good to be with you. And Alan invited me. I've been invited to something amounting to 14 different places since I returned from India at the end of January. And I don't know who's been giving my name around, but I know for this one, Alan got me here. I think Father John Medcalf's responsible for a couple of others, and even a couple of radio programs as well. So the word's gone around. I don't know what they expect or what you expect from me. Alan said to talk about service. And what I want to do is to reflect upon that and let the words come as they will. I never prepare anything, so I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say. Leave it all up to the good Lord. Otherwise, it just becomes the Bert White show, and it's all me, and it's all ego, and it's very little to do with the Lord. So let's hope somewhere in what I say, something will help you, inspire you, move you towards a place of recognition, because truth always comes not so much through, somebody once said, cognition, but recognition. It's a sort of aha experience. And I hope the Lord will use me to do that this afternoon, and that nothing that I say will detract from that. And anything that I do say that is not of the Lord, I ask him to erase that from your minds and just keep with you what he's trying to tell you through me. So I hope I open up enough to that as this talk goes on. Alan, you'll have to tell me to shut up, because you know what I'm like. Once I start talking, I never stop. Service. As soon as Alan said the word service, I immediately thought of the gospel that we had, or the liturgy that was enacted in our Maundy Thursday liturgy, the washing of the feet, when Jesus gives the servant the evening off and gets down and stoops down low. He kneels not to pray primarily, but to serve. And I think that's got to be our first question, because it's going to be the first question that the Lord is going to ask us at the end of time, apparently. We read what's called the last judgment. You can call that the ultimate question. You can call it the bottom line. You can call it the litmus test. Call it anything you like. And apparently, it's very annoying, really, for me, because I sort of go to Mass and say prayers and things like that. He's not going to ask us anything religious. Annoying, isn't it? Because we've been doing it right. We're going to wave our banner before God at the end of time and say, look, Lord, I'm in. He's going to say, what did you do? to any one of these, the least of my brothers and sisters, because then you did it to me. And if you can find me here, you found me. I'm always very wary as a priest of people who are very quick to find Jesus in bread and wine, but can't find him in the irritable next-door neighbour. Very quick. And that's going to be our last judgment, apparently. So it said, and it's, as Father Richard Raw said when he came to England, he said it's the only time in the whole Bible that was repeated 4 times. Something's repeated. And in fact, there's one place where they say, but Lord, when did we do it? In fact, we don't even have to know we're doing it. When I was in Calcutta, and I was working in the Home for the Dying, as I did in January, I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on in this talk, but there were 3 Australian atheists, and they were very quick to tell me they were atheists. Father, we're atheists. I said, I'm sure God doesn't mind. Because the final question is not what, how many prayers did you say, how many masses, how many charismatic conferences did you go on, how many tapes did you listen to, how many praise the Lord. It's not even necessary, apparently, to have a conversion of, by Jesus experience. What did you do, huh? So, in fact, when Alan said to me, service, I thought, yeah, we'll start there. And I want to link that up with experiences I had in India that converted me. And I often say, we hear these terms, I think this is an ecumenical gathering, isn't it? Good, marvellous, great, good. But in the Catholic Church, we have this term called the lapsed Catholic. We're all lapsed Catholics, those of us who are Catholics. I sometimes think there are more lapsed Catholics sitting in the pews on Sunday than there are who don't turn up. And we're also all converts. That's very important. I'm not just playing with words here. I'm a lapsed Catholic because I lapse all the time. I'll probably lapse a bit more before this evening is through, because I fail and I'm weak and I don't answer God's call wholeheartedly all the time. And we're all converts because conversion is ongoing. We've got this thing, oh, are you a convert? Yes, funny questions people ask, are you a convert? People say, oh, when did you come into the church? I say, February the 27th, 1949. Oh, you've been a priest that long, have you? You come into the church because you become a priest. No, you enter God's family in a special way and you say yes, or your parents say yes on your behalf when you're baptized. You come into what we call the church. But somehow, because of the over-hierarchical understanding of church, I only came into the church when I got this thing, which is only a bit of fairy liquid anyway, so I'll take it off. You can separate. Come into the church. Convert, lapsed Catholic. We're brothers and sisters. That's our primary identity. Of one Father, we are children. I think that's where we've got to start. I think we've got to start with a real identity. I heard a story the other day of a Gulf support team in Scotland, and this Scottish mum got together other Scottish mums who had sons out fighting in the Gulf War and got them all together. And they used to meet every week, I think on a Tuesday morning or something. And one day, one of the Tuesdays, a darker lady came to the door and stood there and said, I'd like to come in. And they said, well, you're very welcome. Come in, come in. She said, I'm not sure you'd want me to come in. They said, well, do you have a son fighting in the Gulf War? She said, yes. They said, well, come in. She said, I need support. They said, well, do come in. That's what we're all about. She said, but he's fighting against your sons. He's an Iraqi. And the person who started this group up admitted later she wondered what she would ever do in a situation like that, because she realized that her son could be the very son that killed her own son. And she said that instinctively she got up, went over to the door, put her arms around her and said, come in. And they related as mothers. Not as I'm a British and you're a enemy Iraqi, but they're related as mothers. And when we can get back into that flesh and blood understanding, then we're beginning to understand service. We're beginning to understand what Jesus was all about, the Word who became flesh and lived in us. In fact, the translation in St. John's Gospel is, he pitched his tent among us. He lived there. You know, this idea of pitching your tent, of being one of us. That's what it transliterated, I think the word is. He pitched his tent among us. Now, when I went to India in January, I don't know what I was expecting. I know that I was born there 42 years ago. There you go. You know my age. Oh, man. And I left when I was about 15 months old and came to England. My father and mother brought me and we settled in southeast London, a place called Plumstead, famous for Steve Davis, the snooker player, and also Ralph McTell, who wrote Streets of London. Apparently he came from there. Now Bert White, what a letdown. Anyway, that's where I grew up, went to school at Blackheath, St Joseph's Academy, and brought up in the traditional Catholic way. However, I survived that. And luckily the Lord kept me with him, and found I was entering the priesthood after a time of teaching of 5 years, teaching in primary and secondary schools. And I thought I'd like to go back. You know this thing about roots, you go back, it's like going back to the womb, isn't it? You want to go back to. And so I went to look for this place where I had been born and ended up in Delhi. Well, I started off in Delhi, rather, and found that I'd been particularly ignorant because I thought India is hot. So I hardly took any clothes with me and found that Delhi was very cold. In fact, it had its coldest day for 55 years when I got there. And I was in bed with bronchitis and no jumpers or anything, just cotton clothes. And I thought, this is going to be terrible. Why did I bother coming here? But then everything that happened after that was just pure grace. And my whole agenda that I'd planned about India had been completely turned around. I'd planned to see Father Bede Griffiths, who was down in Tamil Nadu in the south, who'd got an ashram, who's an English Benedictine, who'd got out there. I planned to be with him during Christian Unity Week because he'd married together a lot of the East and the West, and I thought he's the, truly ecumenical kind of energy he was radiating from that ashram, and I wanted to be there then. The Lord said no. I had to be there at another time, which turned out to be perhaps the best time. I think my reflections have got to be associated most strongly with Calcutta, because there I found the Christ in what I called God's dirty pictures. I must admit, I was listening to your prayers as I was standing outside. I was praying with you, although I was outside. I didn't want to come in, and there seemed to be an atmosphere here that I didn't want to spoil by walking through the door. That's why I stayed outside. There was one prayer particularly about God in the sunshine, and I wanted to say, yeah, but God's in the rain too. God's in the clouds, the cloud of unknowing, it's been called. And this preoccupation, sometimes, I'm not saying, I don't know who said the prayers, I don't know who I... But sometimes this preoccupation of light, of clean, of brightness, as opposed to darkness and dirt. And I've just written a poem, in fact, called Darkness and Dirt. And I think at this point what I'd like to do is to read you something that came out of my Calcutta experiences that I call God's dirty pictures. Because it's in the darkness and dirt, isn't it, that the seed births and gives life. So don't be afraid of it. We sometimes get what it's called a heresy, called dualism, where it's either or. Either it's good or it's bad, Either it's white or it's black. Either it's clean or it's dirty. No, it's both. Either it's sunshine or it's rain. No, it's sunshine and rain that makes the garden beautiful. And we've got to trust the cloud, we've got to trust the dirt, we've got to trust the darkness. And it's not bad. In fact, it's only in that interaction of opposites that God can actually work. And we can get sometimes too much obsessed with sunshine and brightness and Christ the light, and forget that he's in the darkness too. He was in the darkness in Gethsemane. I was there 2 years ago, in that very place of darkness and dirt, if you like. And I say that Easter began on that Thursday evening, when that last vestige, that last piece of resistance, Jesus had to let go of. As he said, Father, if this chalice can pass me by, let it, because I don't want to, I'm scared, I'm frightened. How comforting for us that even Jesus was like that. But not my will, but yours be done. A final prayer which we must all say. And I was at that spot in Gethsemane. I was very lucky. I went there earlier, in fact, with Dominic, whom Alan mentioned. We went together because we pals at the seminary, and we used to pray together a lot during our training. And we went together to celebrate that particular birthday where they say life begins, 2 years ago. And we went during the day into Gethsemane, and we were talking. There was a Franciscan there, a Mexican Franciscan, and he got chatting with us, and Dominic said, "Oh, my friend Bert would love to come back this evening in the middle of the night and pray here where Jesus prayed," because the central part of the Garden of Gethsemane was sort of cordoned off. It was a fence, understandably, because everybody would be walking over it and everything. But I felt I'd like to pray in there. I didn't want to push it, but Dominic said, "Oh, he'd like, oh no, not possible, not possible." He said, "Oh, fair enough." So Dominic kept pressing, and he said, "Well, it's his birthday, and it'd be a wonderful birthday present." "Oh, no, not possible, not possible." So I chipped in at that point, and I said, I suppose, I said, trying a bit of psychology, I said, "I suppose if you haven't got the authority to let me in, then fair enough." He said, "Oh, no, I can let you in if I want." So I said, "Oh, right." I said, "Well, oh, I see." He said, I can be in charge," he said. I said, "Oh, it would be wonderful." I said, "What a wonderful..." Yeah, but anyway, I said, if you feel that you can't..." He said, "Come back," he said. And he looked around him. He said, 6 o'clock. He said, "Ring the bell 3 times. So we came back at 6 o'clock, and it was dark. It's February. Rang the bell 6 times, and we went into the central part. The oldest olive tree, which was about 2,000 years old. So imagine that Christ could have been under that tree. And we prayed, and we read the account of the agony in the garden and the arrest. And it occurred to me that that was the moment when Easter began. Because that last piece of holding back, Jesus had to finally let go and say, "Father, not my will, but yours be done. I'm frightened. I don't want to go ahead with it. It's all going to lead to darkness and death, and I'm frightened of death. I'm frightened of hurt. I'm frightened of being kicked and spat at and mocked and crucified. Please don't let it happen." And then, when the acorn bursts, the shoot is already pushing through, isn't it? It's not a case of death and then sort of resurrection. It's death, resurrection. It's one reality. When the seed bursts, the shoot pushes through. And it's that reality that we're baptized into. It's that reality out of which we operate when we serve others. Otherwise, it just becomes social action. It just becomes social action, which is fine on one level. But the Christian message is deeper and far more radical. And I use that word deliberately because it comes from the word radix, which means root, where the sap seeps through, gushes through. We're operating just out of doing good things for people, being nice, and the gospel message is not about being nice. It's not good advice, it's good news. And if we're operating just out of being good and nice and helping, that's fine. A lot of people who are doing that, perhaps a lot of more Christ in them than there is in me. I don't know. I can't judge anybody else. But that is not the Christian message. It comes out of our belief that the Jesus way is the way and the truth and the life. And it hit me that in the darkness and the dirt of Gethsemane, the seed burst through, and Jesus was able to say, "Come what may, Father, not my will, but yours be done." And I knew at that point that Easter Sunday began on Maundy Thursday. Yes, the rest continued. The arrest continued. The trial continued, the condemnation, the sentence, the carrying of the crossbeam, the nailing to it, the crucifixion. And then on Sunday, as we've just celebrated, we're in Easter week still, the resurrection, but it had already happened. He'd already let go, the final letting go. and it's also the beginning letting go. Because with Christianity, the end is just a beginning in disguise. And the door, stand on one side, it is death. You stand on the other side, it is birth. We've got to believe that. Some of you may have heard, I believe in Portsmouth, my tapes go around. It's funny because nobody else hears me anywhere else except in Portsmouth Diocese for some reason. They don't know me very well in Southwark. But I've said it on various tapes here, that I had to learn that when my brother died. Charles died at the age of 33. He was my first funeral celebration. I use that word deliberately. I'll ask a few questions about what I believed then. 33, wife, 4 children. God, what are you playing at? We're tested. Can we believe that the end is really a beginning in disguise? It's all very well singing hymns and praising the Lord and saying creeds and doing it all. When the crunch time comes, can we really, really believe? Martha, do you believe this? Jesus said. I can imagine his eyes penetrating hers. Do you? Yes, my son, my brother, rather, will rise again on the last day. Master, I believe that. I am the resurrection and the life. Can you believe that? Strange thing happened on Wednesday. Well, maybe not so strange. I'm beginning to realize more and more as a priest there's no such things as coincidences, but more God incidences. I buried a 14-year-old boy on Wednesday, James, who was the second child out of only 2 children. The first child died too, Shireen. Both had cystic fibrosis. James, it wasn't so obvious. And the end came fairly suddenly. They didn't realize. They thought he was okay. How do you speak at a funeral where a parent, 2 parents, have lost both their children? No answers, are there? There's only, as I used to say at Maidstone at the nursing school when they used to ask me to come and talk about the chaplaincy work, and they'd always ask me, what do you say if you have to come into a situation where there's been a cot death or a stillbirth or a tragic young death or a tragic anything? And my answer is always the same. You cry with them and you ask the question why with them, because I think God wouldn't talk about God. Do you remember Aberfan? Yeah, October 66, 100 and whatever it is, children killed. And the woman came up to the priest and hit him hard and said, where's your God now? And he said, underneath the mountain with his arms around the children. Swear. See, don't dualize. Don't have either or. It's not God over there and us over here. It's God in here. Sometimes we find it most difficult to meet him within the darkness and the dirt of our own being. On Wednesday, I came home after doing James's funeral, and I had a call out to the hospital at the Kent and Canterbury. One of our teachers at the school, the primary school, had a premature baby, they call a Caesar, and the baby was, as they say, in danger of. Would you come and baptise, Father? Rushed down in the car, because Kent and Canterbury isn't our local hospital. Our local one is the Medway at Chatham. But rushed down there. And would you believe it? I said to the mother, what name have you given your child? James. James. Buried a James, baptised a James, same day. Easter week. Sometimes we don't know how to believe in this. And we say, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. I think the thing we've got to first do is trust in it. Somebody said to me last week, or the week before in Holy Week, they said to me, Father, I can't forgive. I said, I know. I find it very difficult. They say celibacy is the hardest Christian virtue. It isn't. Forgiveness is, believe me. Celibacy is pretty difficult too, you know, especially certain times, like spring, when everything speaks of new life and creativity. But forgiveness is, in my experience, nobody wants to forgive. We want to cling on, hold on to the grudge that we bear. Forgiveness. And I said to this person, yes, I can't either. I find it difficult too. But somehow at the end of the day, we've got to trust in its dynamism and its power. And forgiveness, you know, is not letting people off. And it's not forgetting. Let's get that out of the way straight away. That is not, if you think that's forgiveness, then you're not into forgiveness. As Martin Luther King said, forgiveness is not an occasional act, it's a permanent attitude. Forgiveness is not letting people off, it's taking them on. It's not forgetting, it's the most redemptive form of remembering. And it's saying whatever pain, whatever burden, whatever hurt that you bear, I'm willing to take that for you and carry that with you and for you. That's forgiveness. It's not wimpish. It's the opposite of wimpishness. Oh, you forgave him, didn't you, wimp? No, that's not forgiveness. That is wimpishness if you think it's forgive and forget, and it can be very patronizing. I forgive you. I think God must blow a divine raspberry at that kind of attitude. Oh, I feel, so what? That's not forgiveness. That is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is saying I'm willing to take and bear whatever it is that you're shooting into me, whatever pain it is you're handing me, whatever snide remark you've just made to me. It's not passive. It's the height of activity. And it's remembering at its most redemptive. It's not forgetting. And in fact, isn't that what Christ did when he was nailed to the cross? Shoot it into me. I'll take it. And it's not a once and for all. When we are baptized into that mystery that we call the Paschal mystery that we've just celebrated and we're continuing to celebrate in this Easter tide, we're saying we believe in it. That it's not a case of life after death, but life through death. And that forgiveness and the power of it, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That is the only way through. And it is so hard. It is so difficult. I can't do it yet. I frankly admit that to you. But as I said to that person in Holy Week, we've got to begin by trusting that it is true. Every year, I wonder what to say about Easter. Every year. It's 5 years now, priest. They call a late vocation. Actually, I don't think I'm a late vocation. I think everybody else is early. I think I'm on time. I think it's a good age. Jesus started when he was 30, didn't he? Fed up with his late vocation business. I'm on time. Everybody else too. I mean, going off at 18, ridiculous. Never had any experience of life. I'm on my hobby horse again. Amen. Every year I think, what shall I say about Easter? And every year, I wish I could trust more. Something happens in that Holy Week, which, that's it, that's what I'm going to say. And somebody came, I think it was about Wednesday of Holy Week, and told me a true story. And I thought, yeah, that's my Easter homily. So abbreviating it somewhat. It's a story about the president of Haiti, Father Aristide, who's been suspended by the Vatican because he's gone into politics, all that stuff. So he's been suspended from his priesthood because he's now president of Haiti. But 2 years ago, when he was still working on behalf of the marginalized and the oppressed, the very people Jesus always went to, that he knew he was on the hit list. He knew that he was being hunted down because you start threatening any structures that people feel very safe in, and those people who are the beneficiaries of that very system that's paying them and rewarding them and applauding them, they're going to get very annoyed if you're going to threaten that. And so he was on the hit list, and he knew that, but he carried on. And one day he was saying Mass, and he was preaching. And he looked in the second row, and there, pointing straight at his heart, was the barrel of a gun. And nobody else could see it, because it was just like that, under a cover. And he thought, oh, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? Do I scream? Do I run away? Do I lay flat on the ground? And suddenly he got this vision of Oscar Romero. Do you know the Archbishop of El Salvador, who was shot while he was saying Mass? And he thought, I'm going to continue. By the grace of God, he got strength. And he thought, well, if the last thing that this man knows before he shoots me is going to be anything at all, it's going to be that I love him and I forgive him. So with tenderness in his eyes, he looked at this man, carried on preaching, as if to say, as Jesus said, and as Stephen said, the martyr, Father, don't hold this sin against them. And as Jesus said, forgive him, for he knows not what he does. He looked at him as if to say that, because he was preaching anyway. And then he closed his eyes and carried on preaching, waiting for the shot to ring out to announce the cessation of his breathing. Nothing happened. And he finished his sermon, and they all stood to say the creed, as they do, as we do. And then the offertory bags came around for the collection. And when the bag came to this man in the second row, the gun came out again. And people went, and wondered what was going to happen. But this time, he didn't point it. He opened it and emptied the chamber of bullets into the offertory bag. And then threw the gun in. And then reached into his pockets and pulled out what turned out to be the assassination money and threw that in the bag as well. And wept. And then got up and left. Nobody knows what happened to him. Maybe he was got because he didn't fulfill and didn't complete the task he was assigned. But there's your death resurrection. The power of redemptive love. We believe in it. It's out of that that we act. It's out of that that we operate. It's out of that that we serve. If we don't, then service means nothing. As I said, it's back into the realms of just social action, which is fine. And as I say, there are many good people. Don't make that an either-or thing. Either you're into social action or either you're a Christian. No, Christ is in many of these people, and they wouldn't even call him that. Christ was very deeply in those 3 Australian atheists. Very deeply. They wouldn't have said so. Let me read you my poem. It's called God's Dirty Pictures. I'm asking you to trust the dirt and the darkness. Don't be too quick and ready to just glory in the sunshine, because it's both rain and sun that makes the garden beautiful. I had to learn how to befriend dirt, because I'm a pretty sort of hygienic fella, and somehow trust it. God is found in the gut and the gutter. That's what I learned when I came to Calcutta. And all this time I thought God dressed up smart, scrubbed spick and span and looking the part, rich and important with white robe and beard, as we bow and scrape to this one to be feared. For cleanliness, surely, is what it's about. It's next to godliness, I was told, without doubt. Then I found God in the gut and the gutter. That's what I learned when I came to Calcutta. The saying they taught me is now knocked for 6, because cleanliness and godliness simply don't mix. Calvary's cross should have really taught that. God's first dirty picture shows us where it's at. The blood, sweat and tears, the mud and the stench, but believing all that is too much of a wrench. We're scandalized by such sights so obscene. We'd like to see God in clothes washed, pressed and clean. Going to church has become a phenomenon. Though Christ never asked for it, it's become common in countries where now it's a middle-class practice, performed by nice people, but the stark fact is they're scared of the gut. They sidestep the gutter. I wonder how they would get on in Calcutta. The scenes that I witnessed are now mental fixtures. I found the Christ through God's dirty pictures. There I saw my God as filthy can be, and children on rubbish tips scrambling to see what scraps of food they could find to survive, to keep them and their loved ones barely alive. But this can't be God. No, surely not. He's above this in a more privileged spot. I thought God sat high up on a cloudy ridge, not down in the slums across Howrah Bridge. Where is this Lord who is spotlessly clean, this God disinfected? Where is he seen? My mind was changed and my heart was made newer when I saw him stoop to wash from a sewer. Is This my God, dirty and poor? That's not the God I was trained to adore. This God's foul-smelling, clothes tattered and torn. But then I remember that when he was born on this earth, he was pushed out, no room at the inn. So what's new? We still keep on rejecting him. God's dirty pictures of poverty, pain, assault all our senses again and again, making a point we're so slow to see he's found in places we'd rather not be. Throwaway people, unwanted, unneeded, the cry of the poor continues unheeded. Pavement people with eyes beseeching, deformed lepers, their stumps outreaching. Discarded fetuses thrown in the bin, products of fear and humanity's sin. God is found in the gut and the gutter. That's what I learned when I came to Calcutta. Why look up high when he said, search below, you'll find me just where you don't want to go. Look in your poor flesh, your heart, in your gut. Embrace being human, there is no shortcut. While you are scaling the heights to be holy, you'll pass me by as I sink to the lowly. Whatever you do to my sisters and brothers, you do to me, it's I you'll discover. Don't waste your time on hotlines to the sky and bypass the poor as you walk on by, making quite sure you're not late for mass, while all your prayer is hot air and gas. God's dirty pictures play havoc with faith. If you've been cocooned in the West, make a date, take a trip here, and you'll not be the same. Many have realized this time and again. Jesus in brokenness beckons, I thirst. Forget religion, he must come first. Bathe him, dress him, to his lips hold a mug. Clothe her, feed her, give her a hug. Wrap round a blanket, the password is touch. We're born to embrace, yet it threatens so much. Look into eyes, warm each heart with a smile. Let someone know that they're loved for a while. God's dirty pictures offend and annoy, yet they're the sights of this city of joy, where God queues in rags, she's there to behold, at 54A, Lower Circular Road, humbly begging early each morning. But don't rush to help without heeding a warning. Gandhi was asked a key question one day. What were his views on the Christian way? He looked up, bemused, after thinking a while. We must try it sometime, he replied with a smile. The rich of this world still won't share their wealth. Even the church cannot die to itself. We've been inoculated against Christianity for so long now it seems like insanity. Today, if you try to preach the Beatitudes, you'll meet with blank stares and ho-hum attitudes. Live by the gospel, be branded a nutter. But word became flesh, and your flesh is Calcutta. That was written on Wednesday, the 16th of January, which turned out to be, in fact, the day that war was declared in the Gulf. And the poem is dedicated to the faces of Christ in Calcutta and to the work of Mother Teresa and her missionaries of charity. I will just relate to you three, as briefly as I can, because I'm sure you've got other things to do. But linked up with this theme of service, just three stories from Calcutta which converted me again. I'm not saying I'm there yet. Any of us are. The first, I think, was the meeting and the shaving of a man called John in the Home for the Dying. He died the following day. I went to the Home for the Dying, Kalighat, which is the first place that Mother Teresa opened in Calcutta, in 1952, not knowing what to expect, but wanting to do something, prepared for a culture shock, which I certainly got. I think Calcutta has 12 million people in it, 10 million of whom are homeless. They deform their babies, at birth to beg better. Eyes, to be careful. Arms. And my first night was spent with a bottle of brandy and a lot of tears, trying to cope with this, the paradox and the pain. And then the following day, I went to the Home for the Dying, and they gave you the standard issue blue apron, which you put on. I was determined not to be Father Bert, but just be brother, because I don't think I can dare to be father until I'm brother and son. And within 10 minutes, 3 men had died. And then Sister Suma, who was in charge of the Kaligat Home for the Dying, came along with a dish and a razor blade that looked about 20 years old, razor rather, and some soap and a little bit of brush and some water. And she said, "Will you shave this man? He's just been picked up." And this man had come in matted hair, very long hair, bushy beard, very smelly, lice. I said, "Shave him." He said, "Yes, the whole head, Father. You're in the deep end." And I looked at him and I was frightened. You know, he was sort of other. He was smelly. And although I was born in India, he was sort of Bengali and different. And it suddenly occurred to me, unless I can shave this man, unless I can find Jesus in this old dying man, I'm a bag of wind up there in Walderslade. I've got no right to stand up in the pulpit. I've got no right to stand here in front of you today, because it's just waffle. Pious platitudes that go nowhere. And as I said at the beginning, it's on what we do, not on what we've sort of nominally believed and what label we've got around our neck, Catholic, Anglican, Methodist, Buddhist, whatever it might be. We're sons and daughters anyway. That's the starting point. There's nothing to earn or achieve. That's our beginning point. It's recognizing it, as I said. So I started shaving him. And it's strange. Started with scissors. Started in fear. And St. John says love, perfect love casts out fear. I can say in all honesty, by the time I'd finished shaving him, I loved him. Sounds corny, doesn't it? But I did. He would have been about in his 70s, probably younger because they look older. Do you know the average age is 26 in India for dying? Didn't know that. 26. Well, he was lucky. Or was he? I was lucky. When I preached the following day, and I was proud with a good kind of pride, I think, that I was able to do that. I cut him a few times and I kept saying sorry, and he was just happy somebody was touching him, somebody was caring for him. Just as a side thing, I buried somebody while I was out there who didn't have a name. I named him at his death. Can you imagine? Normally you name people at their birth. Called him Francis. It's the only thing I could come out with, not because I wanted to westernize him or anything, but Francis of Assisi has always been my favourite saint. And as a celibate priest is not allowed to get married, I don't suppose I'll never name anybody in my life. So I named him Francis. They never knew his name. He never knew his name. The following day I came to say Mass in the Home for the Dying. And there was a little boy there of 15 that I hadn't noticed the day before. And I said to Sister Suma, he's new. He looks about 11 or 12. She said, he's 15. I said, how is he? She said, well, he's dying. Where did you find him? Oh, one of the side streets in the gutter. They were setting up for Mass. Mass was at 10 o'clock. It was about 9:45 at this time. I said to her, I'll go and speak to him. So I went and sat with him. I said, do you speak English? No, Bengali. I said, Bert. He said, Sunil. I was holding his hand and I was sort of stroking his head. He was looking very weak, like that. And all of a sudden I realised he had a piece of bread in his right hand. And I thought, oh, perhaps he's trying to break that and eat it. And I'm holding his hand here. So I said, Sunil, eat, sorry. And I thought, because we're going to have Mass in a moment, and after Mass they're going to be cooking, and he won't get anything for a short while anyway, so this might be this last bit of sustenance that he'd have. In fact, I think it was his last bit of sustenance. But you know what he did? He took that bread and he tore it. And you know, in the scripture, the word for that we translate as break is actually tore. Jesus tore the bread. You can't break that kind of bread that Jesus would have had. So he tore the bread and he gave me half. Huh? Last little piece of energy and this last little piece of bread, and he tore it in half. Just because I'd been... And I'd spent 4 years, well, you normally spend 6, I spent 4 in seminary, learning Eucharistic theology, doing essays, reading books, listening to lectures. In a flash, I knew what the Mass was all about from a dying 15-year-old Hindu boy. My eyes filled with tears, and he went to stroke the tears. And I said, "It's okay, Sunil." I said, "I don't know whether I'm happy or sad. Don't know where I am at the moment, but thank you." He was very concerned that I was crying and wondered why. Now, why on earth did Jesus, the night before he died, choose such a simple action as the breaking of bread and say, every time you do this, in love, in memory of me, and we share in love, and take and eat, I am really with you. And we got, in the Middle Ages, we got into all this sort of stuff about transubstantiation and when is the moment it becomes. The Eucharist is dynamic. It's not static. The Blessed Sacrament is an action of taking, breaking, being blessed and being broken for the life of the world. We got into all this nonsense about when is the moment, and they said it's when it, do you remember the Latin, any of it, hoc est, and so it's when it's est, which is ridiculous because in Aramaic there's no verb to be, so Jesus would never have said it anyway. So how ridiculous. No, when you do this, not just say it, but when you do this in memory of me, and it's got to be part of a bigger reality, because unless we are taken, blessed, broken, and given for the life of the world, I bet you any money you like, you're not going to understand what goes on at that table we call the altar. You're not going to begin to understand it until you're taken, blessed, broken, and given for the life of the world. It used to make me laugh when people say, "Oh, I'm too busy saying my private prayers before communion. I can't shake hands with anybody." I think, goodness, you're going to queue up to say you're going to shed your last drop of blood for that person, but you can't shake hands with them. How odd. You don't understand communion. And I understood communion just that little bit more. And I was taught it by a Hindu boy of 15 who was dying and who died, I think, that afternoon. So that's something about service. Second story is about Mooney, M-U-N-N-I, a little 10-year-old beggar girl, one of the pavement people. I used to pass Mooney twice a day, once on my way to the Missionaries of Charity when I used to work in the Home for the Dying or the Children's Home or saying Mass for Mother Teresa, and pass her on the way home. And the first day I met her, she said, "Hello, Uncle." She called me Uncle. I said, "Hello." I said, "How many rupees do you want?" She said, "Uncle," as if to say, don't think of me like that. I'm not after rupees, I'm just greeting you. So I said, "I'm sorry." I said, "What's your name?" She said, "Mooney." I used to call her Mooney, 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 and she used to call me Uncle, 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 and we used to shout at each other across the street, and people used to think we were mad. I used to go, "Mooney, Mooney, Mooney." She'd go, "Uncle, Uncle, Uncle." And if she saw me first, it was Uncle, 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 Mooney, Mooney, Mooney. And really grew to love her over the days, the week I was there in Calcutta. And the last day I was going home, so it was the second time that day, and about something like the 10th time that I'd bumped into her again. And she took her arm and put it in mine, and she walked down the road with me, and I felt so proud. I said, "Where are you going to, Moon? Are you coming back with me?" She said, "Yes, Uncle, you're next to a church, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." She said, "What's it like inside?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, actually, Mooney. I haven't been inside it. I'm not very religious, really." So she said, "Can I come to your church?" I was staying at the Jesuit house, and the church was in the same sort of area, by way of explanation. So, as I say, her alleyway was in between the road that ran parallel where the Jesuit house was and where the Missionaries of Charity places were, so I had to pass her every day. So she walked back with me through this windy alleyway back to the house and back to the church. And we got to the gate, and this fellow was on the door, and Mooney was with me, this little girl, beautiful face she had. And she was behind me, and I thought she was following me in, and I just walked straight into the area where the church entrance was, and suddenly I heard this man who was on the gate man, the doorman, whatever he was, shout out, "I went like that, and Mooney went, She went all frightened. And he was telling her to go away because she was a beggar girl and she shouldn't really have been there, you see. And I went, no, but it's okay. I said, Mooney, come, it's all right, come, take my hand. And she went, I said, Mooney, come, it's okay. She took my hand, very reluctantly at first, looking at this man, but still very frightened of him. And I looked at him and I said, it's all right. I said, she's with me. Because he knew me, of course, because he's hello, father, and all that, because I'd been staying there. So he said, oh, okay, rather surprised I was bringing a beggar girl into the church. So we walked in. Now, I don't know if any of you parents have ever seen this look. You might have seen it in your children when they've won a point, you know what I mean? And they look at you. If I wish I'd taken a picture of that look. It's remain indelibly marked on my mind till the day I die. As she walked past this man, she was on this side, she walked past this man, she looked up at him as if to say, like that. You know what you can do. And I walked to her, I said, Mooney, don't do that, it's naughty. She said, Uncle, he was rude. I said, no, but you mustn't, come. We went into the church. We sat down. And I said, what do you think of the church, Mooney? She said, oh, it's very big, Uncle, isn't it? I said, yes, it is. Rather enormous, isn't it? And she looked at me, she said, Uncle, how do you pray? So I went, gulp, thought of the disciples with Jesus on the hillside. Lord, teach us to pray. So I thought, well, I'm not going to teach you they are, Father. I'll leave that to the missionaries of charity. So I said, what do you want to say, Mooney? She said, to Jesus. So I said, what do you know about Jesus? She said, oh, Mother Teresa's sisters tell me all about Jesus. He's a good man. He helped me. So I said, well, what do you want to say to Jesus? And she said, Uncle, she grabbed hold of my arm, as if I was going to do it. She said, Uncle, you tell Jesus to keep my family well, to always keep us with food, enough food to eat, and Uncle, ask Jesus not to let us lose, get this, our part of the pavement. Not evicted from our council flat or, but lose our part of the pavement. I looked at her and I said, Mooney, that's the most beautiful prayer I've ever heard. Go on. No, Uncle, you say it, Uncle. She pointed to the front. She must have got a sense there was something sacred at the front, the tabernacle or something. Uncle, you. So I said, no, Mooney, I think this has got to be you. You say it. And anyway, I was a bit choked up. So she went, Jesus! Trying to shout so that he could hear. Please don't let us be without food. She had a mother, a father, and 2 brothers and a little sister. Keep us always very well. Jesus, don't let us lose our part of the pavement. So I was sitting there going, So she finished, and I sort of went, I said, okay, come on, let's go. Come on. Uncle, are you all right? Okay, come on. And we walked out of the church, and I said, come on now. I thought, oh, God, I need some fresh air. So I said, it's getting dark now. It's quite dark. So I said, I'll walk you home, Mooney. She said, oh, no, Uncle, you're already home. I said, okay, I walk home, Uncle. I'm okay. Bye-bye. So I said, no, Mooney, I'll walk you home. It's okay. It's only 10 minutes. Come on, I'll walk you home. No, Uncle, she went on. So I turned around. I said, look, Mooney, I said, I've been in India for 2 weeks now, and I've been a week in Calcutta, and I've been trying to do what you do here. I said, now you're going to do what we do in England. And she said, what's that, Uncle? I said, Mooney, in England, when we're with a beautiful girl and it's getting dark, we walk them home, okay? She looked up at me and she said, okay, Uncle. And we went back. Now, this isn't the end. We went back to her place. One of the things I didn't do purposely, I found it very difficult because I'm a very snap-happy person with the camera, but I purposely did not take pictures of poor people just to use them as objects of poverty. And I wanted to get to know, with John, I phoned him, I photographed him when he was shaven, not before, because I didn't know him then, and that would have, here's a poor person, somebody American, here is it, Mother Teresa's home for the day, we'll take a few pictures, I mean, objectifies and dehumanizes these people. So I wanted to get to know them first, and I'd got to know Mooney, so I said to Mooney when we got back to her part of the pavement, I said, Mooney, ask Daddy if it's all right if I take a photograph of all of you. So she asked her father, and her father, who didn't know any English, but knew enough to say, 100 rupees! So now that was obviously a joke. You don't give it, it's stupid giving, it's like £100. 100 rupees for me was like just under £3, something like that. But for them, you gave paces or a rupee or two. You were told, you strictly, not to give any more than that because it isn't right. And that buys enough anyway, that food. I mean, everything's very cheap out there. So he was obviously joking with me. And I thought, well, it's my last night here. I can't wait to see the look on his face when I actually... Anyway, so I took about 3 or 4 photographs, you see. Then I took my wallet out of my bag and I said, right, Mooney's daddy. I said, how much money was it you said? What did we agree on? He goes, 100 rupees. I said, oh, right, okay. So I pulled out the note. And even at the last minute, he's thinking, I'm going to pull it back. So I said, here you are. He goes, yes, yes, yes. And I put it in his hand, you see. And you would have thought he'd have clutched hold of that and said, God, great, feed my family for 3 months. He wouldn't take it, The generosity of the poor, like in Sunil in the Home for the Dying. And Mooney looked up at me and said, Uncle, no, Daddy joke. What would we have done? I know what I would have done if somebody gave me £10,000 or whatever the equivalent would be in this country, £100, whatever. I know what I would have done. He wouldn't take it. I put it back in his hand. I said, look, I made a deal with you. I keep my end of the deal. That's for you. And the look of gratitude in that man's eyes, and his wife too, and the children just stood. I mean, I've seen more dignity and unity in that family than I've seen in many families in England. And they live on the pavement. Go to the toilet in the gutter, wash in the sewer, sleep in the sackcloth. Huh? God, what that taught me. I came back home. I was telling the people in Walderslade in my parish, I said, I came back home and I bought some Indian shirts and so they were, the colours run and being stupid, being a man, basically. I put it in the normal wash and, of course, all my underpants came out pink. Now, before I went to Calcutta, that would have been a mega problem. What am I going to do to get them white? I mean, nobody sees the damn things, honest. What am I going to do, to get them... And I thought, I've been to Calcutta, pink underpants. I can handle that. It's just not a problem. I came back the following day. I'd already said goodbye to the missionaries of charity, the missionary brothers, and the Home for the Dying, the Children's Home, Mother Teresa. I said goodbye to all of them. And I came back to Mooney's little part of the pavement just before I flew off to Madras, which I always thought was a curry, but it's actually a town. And I came back there. And they'd bought, with some of the money, they bought this little campfire thing and they were making their first chapati. I didn't know it was their first. I said to them, you've been eating chapatis all day long. You've been enjoying them. Do you know what chapati is? And they said, no, Uncle. And Mooney said, first one. So I said, when did you last eat? 2 days ago. They didn't even tell me the night before. 2 days ago they were eating. So I thought, well, I'll sit with them, And this is the other thing. I got the understanding of what... in the gospel, when it says Jesus sat with the poor, to sit with somebody was to say, I'm in solidarity with you. I want to be one with you. I want to eat with you. I want to share with you. I love you. That's why the Pharisees got all uptight. And don't forget, it was the religious people who crucified Christ, not the poor people, not the prostitutes or the tax collectors or the lepers. It's the bishops and the priests of his day. I've got to be honest and admit that. And do they still crucify Christ? Do we still crucify Christ? I wonder. I wonder. And I sat with them in the mess and the you-know-what. And I thought, usually I used to look round to see where I was sitting, and I thought, I'm just going to sit. I don't care. I want to be one with them. Mind you, I had a look when I got up, just to make sure. But I sat there, and that was a real joy, and I thought, now I know, Lord, what you did. I know what you did for the first time. I read it, in Gospels, because I'm a priest, and I say, this is the Gospel of the Lord, and I read it, and I sort of preached on it, but I knew it for the first time. And you know what happened? Like with the Sunil experience, the chapati was ready. I was just sitting there with them. The dad took the chapati and tore it in half. It's a universal sign, isn't it? And we'd glibly go out to Communion Body of Christ, Amen Body of Christ, and we'd have all these little separate little cardboard cutouts. That's lost the reality of the breaking of the one loaf and the tearing, rather, and the sharing. We've lost that because it's all neatly pre-cut by nuns who pack it down in Carmelite monasteries somewhere, and we've lost this idea of the loaf. Whenever I say house masses, I get somebody to bake a loaf so that we can break it and share the one loaf, the one Christ. We've lost that in our churches. I suppose for practical reasons there's no other way, but he tore that. He gave me half, big fat me, half of it. And I said, no. He said, Uncle, you help us. Or Mooney said that. My uncle, you help us. Daddy said, you to have it. So I knew what I was to do was to break that and give that to the children. That was my bit, so that's what I did with it. Help me to understand Eucharist, help me to understand service, help me to understand the identification with the least of the brothers and sisters, which is the only question God's going to ask you at the end of your lives. Believe it. He doesn't give a hoot how many times you've been to Mass. Honestly. I don't care if you quote me to the Cardinal Hume, whom I met the other day. He's ever so miserable. No, he's nice, really, he's nice. He gave him the sign of peace, and I smiled my head off. It was the Mass for Malcolm Muggeridge. And I smiled, and I thought, oh, cheer up, Cardinal. Perhaps he needs a big hug or something. Is this on tape? I just want to put it on record. I think Cardinal Hume's wonderful. And perhaps he was just having an off day, you know. Perhaps he didn't like me very much. Anyway. What was I talking about? The chapati, the sign of peace, the sign of sharing, the sign of the Eucharist, you know, the sign of taking, breaking, and giving. Let me just finish with my meeting with Mother Teresa, which was an amazing meeting. I didn't set out to meet her purposely again. You know, everybody goes, oh, I met Mother Teresa. But what happened was that when I went to the children's home, I wanted to go to the home for the dying. The sister in charge there, Sister Alex, said to me, if you want to go to the home for the dying, you meet at the Mother House, and they have Mass at 6:00, and all the helpers from all over the world, they come from all over the world, and they meet there and they go to Calicut. So if you meet with them, so I thought, oh, I'll go along. For some reason, I mean, I wasn't wearing a collar or anything. I didn't take a collar with me to India. It was on my passport anyway if I wanted to say Mass anywhere. Just say I'm a priest from England, and they never asked anyway. But I just went along, and for some reason the sister who let me in just said, oh, Father, you've got enough. How do you know I'm a priest? He said, oh, aren't you? I said, well, I am. She said, will you say the Mass? So I said, yes, all right. And there was another priest who was due to say the Mass, but he came late, a Japanese priest. And I ended up being the main celebrant to about 300 people, including Mother Teresa, who was just sitting in front of me. And I thought, how the heck do you preach to Mother Teresa? So we said the Mass, and we offered Mass for peace because the Gulf date was coming up. And so we offered the Mass for that, and I said a few words. And on the strength of the few words I said, I suppose the sister in charge, who isn't Mother Teresa, she sort of backed out of all that, although she's still there. She came up to me and she said, Father, would you come and give a retreat afternoon to our novices? So I thought, my goodness. Yes. She said, when are you free? I said, until January the 26th. She said, can you come at 3:00? I said, yes, I'm going to the home for the dying this morning, but I'll come back. So I came back, and 3:00, and I thought it was about half a dozen novices. I didn't realise 250 of them sitting in front of me, and I was wheeled in, and I thought they could tell me everything. What am I doing standing up in front here talking to them? So I thought what I'd do was I'd tell my own faith journey, which is what I did. I told my own story of how I lapsed, if you want to use that word, for about 10 years when I was in my late teens to my mid-20s. I didn't go to church. I left it, and I'd gone into teaching, and then I went into the priesthood, and now here I am, blah, blah, and I come to find the house I was born in and all that kind of thing. And I found they laughed very easily at the slightest thing I said. They just guffawed and laughed and pushed each other around. They're full of fun. These lovely, lovely smiles, these little brown faces all in front. This big fat brown face in the front talking to them. And I told them the story of when I was teaching in Thamesmead. Some of you might have heard it, you know, this thing about telling the children in my class, who were about 9 and 10, third-year juniors, about the flight into Egypt, you know, and how I always used to go and make a beeline to this little girl, Jenny, who was a brilliant artist. And we talked about, you know, Jesus had to go into Egypt because King Herod was on the warpath and all that kind of thing. And they all, as I always did, I said, right, children, will you draw a picture and write a little bit about what you've heard in your own words, and then draw a nice picture and colour it all in. I used to go around looking at the pictures. This little girl, Jenny, always did beautiful artistic work. She'd begun a beautiful picture. A lot of attention to detail, but there was one piece of detail she gave attention to that I was a bit curious about, because this little insect buzzing along behind the donkey. And Mary was there, and Joseph, and pyramids and palm trees and all. So after a while, I looked at it and just carried on. And then curiosity got the better of me. And I came out and I said, Jenny, that's a lovely, lovely picture. And she said, thank you, sir. And I said, but I'm a little bit curious. I said, why have you got that insect buzzing along behind the donkey? She said, but sir, that was in the story you told us. So I said, I don't remember that, Jenny. When did I say that? And she said, but sir, you said you told us all about that in the story. I said, but everything else in the story is there. I said, you got Joseph leading the donkey with Mary sitting on the donkey and the baby Jesus, and lovely palm trees, and those are the pyramids, aren't they? Yes, she said, lovely, but what? She said, sir, you said that the angel appeared to Joseph and said, take Mary and Jesus and flee into Egypt. Now, what the level of laughter here, the level of laughter here was nothing compared to those 200. I had to wait a few minutes before they stopped laughing, and I thought, well, are they taking the mick? But they were laughing so loudly. Anyway, there was a bit of input of spirituality through it. Well, I mean, laughter is part of our spiritual journey too, isn't it? It's learning to cope with paradox, we laugh. So anyway, I gave this talk for about an hour, which is probably a lot shorter than what I've done today. I honestly will stop in a moment. And as it finished, they all, thank you, Father, and namaste. They give this little sign, namaste. They put their hands up like this and bow. That was the sign of peace. And I went in and I sat in the little sacristy, and all the sisters went out to do their little jobs, their little pieces of work, their little tasks all over the mother house. And the sister in charge came in with a cup of coffee with me, and she said, Father, she said, Mother Teresa could hear all the noise coming out of the chapel, she said, and she wants to come and see you. I thought, oh, God. I thought, God, I should have had more respect for the Blessed Sacrament and all this sort of stuff, and I should have, oh, dear, more reverence. And I'm meeting Mother Teresa for the first time, and the first time she's going to tell me off. Well, God, how can I hold my head up when I go back? And so the first thing Mother Teresa said to me was, Father, you're a very bad man. Anyway, so I waited in trepidation with the coffee, Anyway, all of a sudden, through this door, the person I'd seen that morning, this little saint whom I'd seen in photographs and newspapers, on the television, all that, she was standing in the doorway, little, hunched up. And she came in with her arms like this, and I thought, oh, she's going to be nice before she tells me off. So I took both her hands, and I said, hello, Mother. She said, Father, she said, thank you for coming. She said, I heard all the noise coming out of the chapel. She said, I know, Mother. I was just about to say I was very sorry. She said, I heard all the laughter, she said, coming out. I said, yes, Mother, I know. Just before I could say anything, she said, Father, thank you. I said, yeah? She said, thank you, she said, for bringing joy to our house, for bringing the sound of laughter to, my novices. She said, thank you so much. And I went, gulp, She said, sit, Father, sit. So we sat down and we talked about for an hour. We talked and talked. She said, what was it? She said, your princess is coming here next month. She said, what's her name? So I said, you mean Diana? She said, yes. She said, she wrote and said she wants to come to see me. I said, let her come if she wants. She said, her husband came here a couple of years ago. I mean, she's so... And it's not for effect. She'll treat her the same as she treats a man she picks out of the gutter or a baby she picks out of a dustbin. It's exactly. And there's no effect to make. There's nothing. Marvellous. She said, you have a new Prime Minister now. I said, yes. She said, what's he like? I said, well, he appears to be wanting to do something about the homeless, because I knew she'd be interested in that, because she knew that homelessness had doubled, especially amongst the young over the last 10 years, 12 years. So she said, yes, I met the one before, she said, didn't say her name. I met the one before, she said. I didn't get very far with her, she said. I said to her, Mother, isn't it strange that your initials are the same, MT? She just went, But very, very... The thing that struck me, and this I will end with, and it is really what I want to... I think it's a fitting ending to what our lives are to be in service. We're not meant to have all the answers, okay? I hope that what I've said this afternoon plunges you back into the paradox, not just of sunshine, but of cloud and of rain, not just of cleanliness and all that stuff, because cleanliness isn't necessarily next to godliness. Sometimes the dirtiness is, okay? Please remember that, because that's a lie. It's only a half-truth, and if it's a half-truth, it's a lie. It's the paradox of both and, not either or, okay? And the final message I want to give is the trust in that paradox, trust in the place where opposites can coexist in a sort of creative tension, where God lives in that darkness, in that dirt, and that jungle of your own sin, that's where his best disguise is. And he's longing for you to shake hands with him there, but you don't because you think that's all horrible. Well, embrace the leper within. When I shaved John, there's something about me I was shaving. There was something about me in him that I was greeting and kissing and embracing. And if we can do that, then we've met that person within perhaps that we don't like. And we've got to trust that place. We've got to trust, that's the only. And I think faith has become, I often say this, faith for most of us, for Catholics anyway, became over the years a deposit that we kept hold of. And in a way it's on a completely different track because it keeps us in control. Faith is not a deposit, it's a journey of surrender and surprise, always. And you've got to trust. And this gives you the best example I've ever had of trust. Mother Teresa does not accept money. Okay, so don't send her any money. She won't accept it. She won't accept fundraising. She won't accept any money left in wills. She will not bow before the god of Mammon. And she decided to do it. She won't accept awards now either. She refuses to go and accept awards. She says it gives me too much prominence and, I could be here, spending my time better than going around the world, using up aeroplane tickets and getting awards. So you can give them to me, but put them in the post. She went to New York to open an AIDS hospice. And she got a lot of stick for that as well, because are you encouraging this and that and the other by opening? And her response, typical Mother Teresa, she said, the AIDS victim is Jesus Christ at his or her most desperate. What more to say? What more to say? And the Knights of St. Columba there had organised a big dinner for her. And she gets a bit embarrassed at big things like this. She always goes in the same old sari and the little knitting bag she carries around with her and little jumper she wears. And she went along to this do. And at the end of it, the grand night, or wherever he was, these guys who wear all the ribbons and medals and all this stuff, he got up and he said, well, Mother Teresa, we've come to the end of our meal and thank you for the talk you've just given. They'd all clapped politely. He said, well, we got a surprise for you, he said. We have decided that from now on, ad infinitum, on the first day of every month, we shall pay into any bank of your choice in Calcutta the sum of not one, not two, not three, 4 or 5, but 10,000 American dollars. And everybody clapped and whooped it up and thought it was marvelous. Mother Teresa just got up and pulled the microphone down to her level and just looked. It all went quiet, waiting for her to speak. And she said, no, thank you. I think the word gobsmacked was invented for that particular moment. They didn't know what to say. And, of course, the only thing the man could think was, because if you live out of a capitalistic kind of from-the-top, money is the answer to everything worldview, well, they obviously are going to think, well, what do you give? You give money, don't you? And so, but Mother, we can afford it, because that's the immediate thing he thought, was that she thought they couldn't afford it. If we can, we've got investments, we've got... No, she said, I don't accept money. And they didn't know what to do. So he got up again. It all went quiet. It was a bit embarrassing. He said, well, Mother, what would you like us to do? Your time and your love, she said. Go out onto the streets of New York. There are plenty. I've seen them. There are homeless. Take blankets. Come and volunteer to work in our AIDS hospice. Give some of the clothes that your children have grown out of. And do that. And then you'll be entering into the spirit of what we're doing in Calcutta. But first, find it here. And in fact, she said, find Calcutta in your own heart, which is what I was trying to say in that poem. Your flesh is Calcutta. If you find it there, then you'll be able to do it. It's quick, it's easy and quick. And she said anybody can put their hand into their pocket and pull out and write out a check. In fact, it's a way of getting away from giving. Just like saying prayers is sometimes the best way to avoid praying. Think about that one. And getting into religion is sometimes the best way to avoid God. Sometimes writing out a check is the best way to avoid the surrender of the self. Because it's no vulnerability, it's a bit of paper. It's conscience money, maybe. Then she said, you'll understand. And I said to her, but Mother, how do you cope? I said, I love it. I think it's fantastic. And in your constitution, I said to her, you've written it. So when she dies, it's the first religious order in the history. A religious orders in the Christian tradition that has not bowed, well, I won't say bow before the God of Mammon, that's passing a judgment, but has not allowed that kind of thing to happen. And she's not short of a thing. And she's the only order in the world that is growing. Do you know that? Because people can see truth and say, it's happening. The least of the brothers and the sisters are being served. I can cope with that. Atheists can cope with it. That's why she's so ecumenical. And if she meets a Hindu, she says, "You're a Hindu, be a good Hindu." She's not trying to drag them into the church, move you into my space, which actually is a big ego trip, really, which much missionary work was. We've got to admit it. It's just European ego. We've got the European white, blue-eyed Christ, and you've got to become like him. Nothing to do with meeting the Christ already there, who might have a different colour face and a different culture and a different way. And Mother Teresa's totally affirmative in that. Totally affirmative. Totally trusting. And she gave me an example. And this is honestly the end, Alan. She said that morning they'd run out of pills for the Shishu Bhavan, which means children's home up the road. It's the lower circular road, for a particular child that needed that. And she said, we ran out. I said, what did you do, Mother? I mean, surely that's when you need money, isn't it? She said, I prayed. I said, and what happened? She said, well, in the afternoon, she said, the parcel arrived from Germany. I said, oh, the pills. She said, lots of things in the parcel. She said, lots of things. One of the things was a big bottle of pills that we needed for the afternoon dose. And I said, Mother, I when it comes to faith, I haven't got faith. I haven't got that kind of faith. It's stupid. I said, and I go back to England and I tell people that, and they're going to think you're making it up. She said, tell them, Father, it's up to them what they believe. Tell them. So I'm telling you. That's what she said. She said, when you have faith, the extraordinary becomes the ordinary. And then what she did, she got up to go because time had run out, as it has now, and she got down on her knees and she said, bless me, Father. I said, Mother, you blessed me by asking me to bless you. And I put my hands on her head and said a blessing for what it was worth. Well, the Lord uses all of us. And she got up, and the last thing she said to me was, Father, one more thing. I said, anything, Mother, you just say it, anything. She's about this high, tiny. She said, every time you put that little drop of water into the wine at the offertory, she said, I said, yes. She said, can I be that drop of water? I said, yeah, you got it. Yes, every time. And she went away. Total trust. Absolute total surrender. And as I say, the journey of faith, and it's not a deposit, it's a journey of surrender and surprise. Surrender and surprise. And if we can surrender in trust, we'll be open to the God of surprises. And then if we act out of that kind of faith, then our service, as we wash the feet of the world, will be worth something, because it will be truly in the servant King, Christ himself. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, I think we have a roving microphone, so if anybody has questions.
It's quiet now.
It's something I couldn't quite relate to. I put this without being judgmental or anything. But when you said that she wouldn't receive money, Mother Teresa,
Yes.
because she feels she'd be bowing down to Myra. Now, I can't see that receiving money and doing what she's doing, you with it, would be bowing down to Myra. I mean, that to me is... I mean, there seems to be a tradition in the church that's ground in that to be a Christian is to be poor, and to money is evil, and then I don't see that.
Oh, I don't think that's been the tradition in the church. I think it's been the opposite. It's like the joke about the priest on board the plane, where the plane was going to crash and everybody was screaming, and the person sitting next to the priest is, why don't you do something religious? And he took up a collection. So there's always been that idea of collecting money, not about being poor. In fact, we haven't really believed Jesus when he said, blessed are the poor. We haven't. We've done everything we could. I mean, look at the riches and the property ownership and all the rest of it. So that's what I'd say in answer to what your question. Straight, that's what comes to mind. I don't think it's been a tradition of really believing blessed are the poor, the first of the Beatitudes. I think we've never believed it. We've only got to look at where I live.
Do you think that Jesus meant that?
I think what Jesus was saying is, until you come to this place of poverty and emptiness, this place where you've got nothing left to prove or protect, you're not going to understand my message, because you'll always use it to support your own purposes, to baptize me into your own culture or your own whatever. And I think we've done this to Jesus for so long. Who is the real, will the real Jesus Christ stand up? And I would say that we've never believed in the Beatitudes. So I said in my poem, we think people, if you try to preach the gospel, people just think, oh, well, you don't really believe that, Father, do you? The thing is, I do. I don't practice it very well, but I do believe it's the way through. And in fact, that's what's happening.
The question is, I couldn't understand when you said, I quoted you, you said that she wouldn't receive money because she'd feel she'd be bowing down to Mammon.
Yeah,
the first thing she was using the money for, I wouldn't have thought that was the case.
Well, what she was saying is she trusts totally in God. Now, of course, God might use money to get to her, and in fact, it has happened that people have just turned up at the right time with the right check, but she won't make it a policy. She won't make it a policy of fundraising, and she has accepted certain things that are obviously from, in her discernment anyway, from God's way of helping her. But she's been given buildings, she'd rather be given material things because they involve a certain giving up of something, whether it's somebody's time, somebody's love. She says, come and help, give your time. And in that sense, I'm totally with her. I admire her courage. I can't do it. But it's the faith, it's the trust thing I'm trying to get across in that story, that she totally surrenders in trust to God. You see, the moment we get into the world of money, we're getting into the world of what works. And that really does move against faith a lot of the time. I know I'm seduced by money myself all the time. And it's a real God today. It's a false God. A real false God, if that can make any sense. And I think most people do bow towards money. I know. Making money, the accumulation of money is in fact an addiction. It's an actual addiction.
Yeah, surely with the sort of problems you got out there.
She's not into that kind of. She's not into that kind of thing. Into the world of what works.
Money?
Yeah, she's not there. See, we live in the world of what works. That's the only way we can look. What's going to work? She doesn't think like that. Lord, what do you want me to do? I'll do it. Put my total trust in you. Not what's going to work. What's going to be most effective. We live in the world of what's effective. What works. She doesn't live in that world. See, we can't. It's so difficult for us because we're in a culture of what works. Now, how are we going to solve this problem? We're in a problem-solving society, problem-solving church as well. And that's not the world. That's not the world of faith. The world of faith, it doesn't live in the world of what works and how are we going to pay for it. The world of faith lives in the world of surrender and surprise, as I've tried to say. I haven't met very many faith-filled people. Well, I have, and they're the most unlikeliest people you'd ever meet. Often they're very often they don't belong to a church. Yes.
Talking about money again, I just happened to walk in when you're talking about the Sermon on the Mount, Yes. Blessed are the poor, and I think this must be it is for me one of the great things, poor. But then, money, as well as poor in spirit, we also talk about that. But the very poor of the poor can be very rich because they're always envying somebody else. So it's how we use our material goods, surely, is how we come to terms with this paradox of money and poor.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You can be rich on the number of prayer meetings you go to. You can be rich on the number of prayers you say. You can be rich on your spiritual riches, which is the worst form, of course.
And I think that the thing that got me with your talk was the fact that God's dirty pictures. I know so many of us, we think that we are or we try to be, to work so much for our own salvation, when really God has already been our salvation.
Yeah, which is heresy.
But we're constantly trying to work for our own salvation. And I think that's what we've got to think about.
Can I tell you all now, and I'll take a load off your minds and hearts, you're already in heaven. Okay, there's nothing to add or achieve. Can I just tell you that? There's everything to rediscover and recognize. Please believe that. Please believe that. You are already children of God. Already. There's nothing you have to achieve. If you're into the achievement game, it's a heresy called Pelagianism. This was rampant in the early church, and it's come back again. You know, you can earn your salvation, you can buy it. I think you've got to start with the fact that you are beloved. You are my beloved son, my beloved daughter, in whom I'm well pleased. And if we start there, then our actions will flow. It's not a case of feverishly trying to get to heaven. Oh, I find that language so difficult. If you love, it's not a case of if you're good, you'll go to heaven. It's a case of if you're good, it's a sure sign heaven's come to you. Okay, it's the other way around. Like John Powell, have you heard of John Powell, the American Jesuit, who said, you don't need to change in order that God loves you. God loves you in order that you can change. And I think that's important for us. Meister Eckhart, the German mystic, said, the spiritual life is more to do with subtraction than with addition. And we're seduced, again, I use that word deliberately, by big, more, and up. We've got to climb up. And Jesus always said, go down. And we think it's all about going out, climbing ladders of success. Carl Jung was asked, and I think this was given at the end of, if any of you went to Father Richard Raw's talks when he was in England last year, he said at the end of the last story I think he told at his Canterbury talk, Alan was there then too, recording, and he said about Carl Jung, who was a very Christian man, and they said to him at the end, towards the end of his life, what's been your spiritual journey or faith journey? And he said, climbing down, not up, but down 10,000 ladders till I could finally shake hands with this little clod of earth that is me. Now that, it's down. And we think big is better, more is better. And, small is beautiful. That book by Schumacher, small is beautiful. Jesus said it over and over and over again, and we can't believe the paradox. We're still into more, get more money, more numbers, more prayers, more... No, less. Less. Yeah?
Because we don't want to see our own selves, what we are really. And we don't like that.
Physical nakedness is easy compared with spiritual nakedness. Yeah, we have to pose, don't we? Even before God, we pose. God, will you accept me? I'll put my religious self on now because I'm next to God. What do you really like? Your best prayers are when you're angry and you're telling God where to go. It's your best prayers. That's really you. Like I did when my brother died. I really prayed, and I used the air was blue, but I prayed. And I think until you're free enough in your relationship with God to really, I don't think you've started on your spiritual journey. I think you're still posing. Yeah, you're still a poser before God. Take your masks off. Be who you are. Because if he can't love you there, he doesn't love you, basically. If he can't love you in your nakedness and your mess and your stupidity and your all the rest of it, which he loves anyway. So don't pose.
When Mother Teresa came to England,
Yes.
she said that it was worse for the homeless in this country than it was in Calcutta.
Yeah.
I just wondered what your views are on that.
Yeah.
Are people getting enough help in this country?
Yeah. She said the spiritual poverty here is worse than the material poverty there. And she went round London, didn't she? She went round to Cardboard City. Actually, there's a very interesting sign in Cardboard City, which is amusing, but has a profound truth to it. Somebody scrawled in Cardboard City, I am answering a question on this, somebody scrawled in big letters on one of the boxes, Cardboard City. And in brackets underneath, somebody else has added, twinned with Vatican City. Think about that one. Very interesting. Yeah. Wonder what went through that person's mind. Here we are, prophets among the homeless. But as I said, the pavement people, especially that family I met, I found more dignity and unity in that family, and happiness and joy in the nothing that they had, than many who have so much here. And they do say, that the richer the country, the higher the suicide rate. Sweden had it for many. Woking was the highest a few years ago, and it's a very affluent town, because I know, because I used to do my pastoral work there from the seminary. So Mother Teresa